Hello, everybody. It's Mr. Greer, good old Peter. Today we're going to talk about finding what a percent one number is of another. This is on page 113. So this is not as difficult as it sounds. It sounds kind of convoluted, finding what percent, one number is of another. But let's just go over example one first before we get into some problems, and then I'll do some problems with you. And there are plenty of other things left over from there that we can work on as well. Example one, and this is all found on page 113. Example one says 9 is what percent of 45? 9 is what percent of 45? The first thing you do is that you put the part over the whole. So remember, when it comes to percentages, a lot of it is 100% is the whole, right? So 45 is the whole, which means 45 out of 45 would be 100%. But they're asking, what is 9? What is 9? What percent of 9 is 40 of, what percent is 9 of 45? Okay? So 45 over 45 is the whole, right? Because 45 is the whole. They want to know what is 9. Now, fractions are another way of talking about parts of a whole, right? So if you're looking at something like this, say 9 over 45, you know that 45 is the whole and 9 is that fraction of the whole. It's kind of like when we were dealing with the pizza, or the circle or whatever you want to call it. And we would, break it up into pieces. And to make the whole circle, there are 4 pieces. But if we were to take some chunks out, say I just wanted to remove this away from it. If I took this out, there are 1, 2, 3 of the 4 full pieces left. So this is 3/4. Okay? If we were to say percentage-wise, though, well, all 4 pieces is 100%, but 3/4 of it would be 75%. Because if you look at 100% divided by 4, that's 25, right? That's quarters, quarters to a dollar or whatever. And so 25, 25, 25 equals 75. But if this was a full circle, then 25, 25, 25, and 25 would be 100. All right? So that's what we're looking at here. So let's go back to this one. This is 45. And again, 45 out of 45 would be 100%. But 9 is what percent of 45? The first step you're going to do is you're going to write the part over top of the whole. Just like we did here with our pizza or circle, this is the whole, this is the part. And so we write the part, the 3, over the whole, which would be the 4. Here, we're going to write the part, which is the 9, over the whole, which is 45. Now, after you do this, life's going to become a lot easier. And then you go to your next step, which is to reduce. And 9 over 45 can be reduced to 1/5. How do I know that? You can use your times table. You can use your handy-dandy calculator to figure out what's going on here. Because 9, you got to find a number that can go into 9 and 45 evenly. 9 can go into 9 one time. 9 can go into 45 5 times. So 9/45 gets reduced to 1/5. Now that we've done our reduction, our division can be a little bit easier because that's our next step, is we're going to divide. So 1/5, 1, divided by 5. 5 can't go into 1, so I had to add a decimal point. So I can add a 0 here, and then you move your decimal point up to the proper place. 5 can go into 10. 5 times 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. Do our subtraction. Our answer is 2/10. That is our decimal answer. We need to turn this into a percent. To turn a decimal into a percent, you move the decimal place over to the right 2 times, and that will get you 20%. So step 1, write the part over top of the whole. Step 2, reduce to make your life easier. Step 3, do the division. And then the final step is turn your answer, which is your decimal, into a percentage. Change to percentage. So 9 is 20% of 45. And there's your answer. Now that was the example from page 113. Let's do a couple of problems. So usually I'll write out the entire problem, but it's a word problem essentially. So just take a look on page 113 in your math book and you'll see. Number 1, well, row 1, the very first question is 8 is what percent of 16? So 8, and they're saying what percent of that of 16? 8 is what percent of 16? Step 1, write the part over the whole. So you might say, Mr. Greer, how do I know that 16 is the whole? Because they're saying 8 is what percent of 16? So that's how we know we're looking. This is the whole here. That's how we know. And generally for all of these questions that we're going to get for page 113, that second number, the larger number is the whole, and the smaller number is your part of that whole. So now we have 8/16. Now we want to reduce. So 8/16, I'm looking at 8 and 16. They're even numbers, so I could reduce by 2. We could go higher than that, can't we? Could reduce by 4. I think we can go even higher than that. And if you look at your times table or use your calculator, you'll see that you can reduce 8/16 by the number 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1. And 16 divided by 8 is 2. So 8/16 can get reduced to 1/2. Now our next step is to do our division. So 1 divided by 2. There's our setup. So do you see how we went from this word problem to putting the part over the whole, then reducing, and now we're going to our division step. 2 can't go into 1, so what I can do here is add a decimal, so I can start putting some zeros there. I'm going to raise my decimal up to put it in the right spot. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2 times 5 is 10. Do my subtraction, and there's my answer, right? 5/10. But we're not done because I have to turn this into a decimal. To turn 5/10 into a decimal, I have to turn it into a percentage. So to turn this decimal into a percent, move the decimal over 2 spaces to the right, then fill in the 0. So your answer is 50%. So 8 is 50% of 16. Okay? Let's try another one. The next one says that, draw a line here just to make things a little bit neater. The next one says that 15 is what percent of 60? 15 is what percent of 60? So again, the first thing we do is we write our part over the whole. So 15 over 60. All right? From there, now we got to figure out what number we could use to work with 15 and 60. So I look at 15 and 60, I'm thinking multiples of 5. And I'm going to get gutsy and just try and see how many times 15 can go into 60. So 60 divided by 15. Oh, 15 will work. We can divide the numerator and the denominator by 15. 15 goes into 15 one time, and 15 goes into 60 4 times. So there's our fraction so far, 1/4. Now we have to do our division. 1 divided by 4. 4 can't go into 1, so I'm going to add my decimal so that I can put some zeros in. Let's raise that decimal up to the proper position. Okay, now we can get to work. 4 goes into 10 just 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8. I'll do my subtraction. 10 minus 8 is 2. I'm going to add another 0 here and bring that 0 down. 4 can go into 25 times. 4 times 5 is 20. Do my subtraction. There we go. So our decimal is 25 hundredths, but we need to turn this into a percent. We turn the decimal into a percent by moving the decimal over 2 spaces. So my answer is 25%. So 15 is 25% of 60. Okay, let's keep going. So the last one on row 1 is asking us, it says 27 is what percent of 81? 27 is what percent of 81? All right, well, let's take a look here. The first step is to write the part over top of the whole. So we're going to write 27 over 81. Okay? So I'm looking at 27, I'm looking at 81. They're odd numbers, so that's not going to work. I can see if 27 can fit in 81 using my calculator. Wow, it actually worked. 27 goes into 27 one time. 27 goes into 81 3 times. You also would be right if you picked 9, because 9 goes into 81 9 times. 9 goes into 27 3 times, so you would have had 3 over 9, right? But then you could reduce 3/9 to 1/3, okay? So here I just used the larger number. Now, you say, well, Mr. Greer, you've been using the part as to reduce. Is that going to work 100% of the time? No. And if you realize that the part, you can't use the part to reduce, just start using different numbers that make sense. Remember, if it ends in 0, something in the tens table will make sense. If it ends in 0, one number ends in 0 and one number ends in 5, that a multiple of 5 will make sense. All right, if it ends in an even number, then 2 will make sense. And if 2 makes sense, C of 4 or 8 will make sense to reduce by. All right, just remember those numbers. If it ends in like a 6 or a 9, you could try 3 and see if that'll make sense. All right, but as of now, we're just using my calculator. I figured out that 27 can go into 81 3 times, and 27 go into 27 1 time. So now we're at our fraction 1/3. Now we got to turn this fraction to a decimal. So 1/3. So 1 divided by 3. Okay. And so 3 can't go into 1, so we're going to add a decimal so we can start putting some zeros down. I'll bring my decimal up, put it in the right place. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9, and 10 minus 9 is 1. I'm going to add a 0, bring that down. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Do you see what's going to happen here? It's going to be 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. But instead of that, remember, when we're trying to find percentages, we can stop right here. Okay? This is going to become our main percent. It's going to become our main decimal here. And then we're just going to go 33 hundredths and 1/3. So our decimal is going to be this. Okay, 33 1/3. Turn this decimal into a percent. We're going to move the decimal over to the right 2 spaces. And if you remember, when we move it over like this, when we turn it to a percent, we just lose that decimal. And our answer is 33 1/3%. All right. So we started out here, 27. What percent of 81? We reduced using the number 27 to turn it into 1/3. And then we divided 1 divided by 1/3 to get 33 1/3. It's a little fraction there. We moved our decimal over 2 spaces to turn it into a percentage. And when you move that decimal over and turn it to a percentage, this little decimal here just kind of disappears, and then you end up with your percent sign. Okay? So that was the third one in that row. Let's take a look at row 2, just to make sure we understand what we're doing here. Now, row 2, the first one in row 2 says 9 is what percent of 90? 9 is what percent of 90? Okay. So from there, we're going to say, okay, we're going to put our part over the whole. So 9 over 90, our part over the whole. Then we're going to turn this fraction into a decimal by, actually what's our next step is to reduce, right? So you're looking at 9 and 90, and hopefully you're saying, well, 9 can go into 9 one time, and 9 can go into 90 10 times, 1/10. From there, we can do our division, 1 divided by 10, right? Now 10 can't go into 1, so I'm going to add a decimal so I can start adding some zeros here. Move my decimal up to the proper space. 10 goes into 10 one time. 10 times 1 is 10. So I'm going to do my subtraction. So our answer is 1/10. But we need to turn this into a percentage, which means we move the decimal over 2 spaces to the right. And remember, when you see a hole there, you fill it in with a 0. So our answer is 10%. 9 is 10% of 90. And that makes sense, doesn't it? All right. Let's move on to the next one in row 2. The next one says 12 is what percent of 72? 12 is what percent of 72? All right, well, let's take a look. First, we put our part over our whole, our part over the whole, right? Then we can see if we can reduce. So I'm getting so cocky with using the numerator to reduce. Let me see if 12 can go into 72. 72 divided by 12. Let's see what that is. It works. So 12 can go into 12 one time, and 12 can go into 72 6 times. 12 over 72 can get reduced to 1/6. Now let's do our division. 1 divided by 6. Okay? So here we go. We need to add a decimal because 6 can't go into 1, and I need to add some zeros here. 6 goes into 10 one time. 6 times 1 is 6. Do my subtraction. 10 minus 6 is 4. Let's add a 0. 6 can go into 40 6 times. I forgot to bring my decimal up. Make sure I do that. 6 times 6 is 36. 40 minus 36 is going to get you 4. And we're not going to add any more zeros, are we? Because again, when we're looking for percents, we only need to move over 2 decimal spaces. So we're going to stop right here. So this is going to be the main decimal, and our fraction attached is going to be 4 over 6. So 16 hundredths and 4/6. Except we can reduce 4/6, can't we? Using the number 2. 2 can go into 4 2 times, and 2 can go into 6 3 times. So our answer really is 16 2/3, but that's our decimal answer. We need to turn it into a percent, which means, again, we're going to move the decimal space over 2 places. And then when we're moving it over to turn to a percent, we just drop that decimal. The answer is 16 2/3%. So 12 is 16 2/3% of 72. Okay? And let's do that last one in row 2. The last one says 40 is what percent of 320? Now, remember what I always say, no matter how big the numbers are, the steps stay the same. So first we're going to go ahead and write our part over the whole. Part over the whole. And then we can try to reduce. Now, if you're looking at it, it's easy to say, well, 40 and 320, we can get rid of these zeros, right? That'll get you 4 over 32. But I think we can do more than that. Look at your times table, use your handy dandy calculator. Can 4 go into 32 evenly? It sure can. So let's reduce by 4. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 32 8 times. So our fraction's 1/8. Now we need to turn that into a decimal, don't we? So we're going to do our division next. 1 divided by 8. We're going to add a decimal because 8 can't go into 1. Let's put our decimal in the right spot on the top so it's in the right place. 8 goes into 10 one time. 8 times 1 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Bring down the 0. 8 goes into 20 2 times. That'll be 16. 20 minus 16 is going to be 4. Now here we can stop here, right? I know if we add another 0, that'll be 40. And then 8 times 5 is 40. So the answer could be 125 thousandths. But we're working with percents. So generally we stop here at the hundredths place. All right. And then, so this will be our main decimal here. And then the fraction attached to it is going to be 4/8. So our decimal is 12 4/8. But we could reduce that 4/8, can't we? Because 4 can go into 4 one time. 4 goes into 8 2 times. So our real decimal is this, isn't it? Now we've got to turn that into our percent by moving the decimal to the right 2 spaces, 1, 2. And when you turn it into a decimal, you just kind of turn the decimal to a percent. The decimal just kind of disappears, and then you have 12.5%. And that's how you do that final problem. So you've seen some problems in the beginning where it worked out very simple and very easy, right? 50%, 20%. Then we ended up with some problems where you ended up with the fraction percents, right? 33 1/3%. And of course the 12.5%, okay? But that's how you find what percent one number is of another. What I'd like you guys to do is try and do numbers, do the rest of the page, 3, 4, and 5. Do the rest of page 113. And if you have any questions, just come write it for me, and I'll see you guys in a little while. All right? Thank you. Bye.